Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Walter Bosley channel. And this is a show, a discussion that I've been wanting to have for quite a while. And this guest today, I've been wanting here for a few years, and we're finally making it happen. Rene Barnett is, one of the experts out there on Rennes-le-Chateau. She travels there frequently, and she's just really someone you got to get to know if you don't know her work already. So I want to thank everyone for being here, and we're gonna get into this today. So I will bring Rene in, and we'll just jump right into it. Hey, Rene, how you doing?
I'm good, Walter. How about you?
Great, great. This is like I was just telling them, this is a show I've been wanting to do for a while, and we have talked, over the phone a few times.
Yeah.
We've talked on your show, and I'm just excited that you're here. So thank you, and welcome to the Walter Bosley channel today.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. So glad to be here, and I'm excited to make some connections with across our research today.
Oh,
So
absolutely, and they are there, I think.
yeah.
So for the audience, just kind of give them a basic rundown of what Rene Barnett does, and particularly where Rennes-le-Chateau is involved in your vast experience with it.
Okay. Thanks. Well, I'm a television producer, and I've been interested in this subject of Rennes-le-Chateau and the overarching mysteries for quite a number of years. I think I first got into, first time I heard about it was in 1982 in a book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail by authors Bajet, Lee, and Lincoln. And it sort of stirred a little something at the time. I became also interested at that time in the Cathars, who were a so-called heretical Christian sect that were very prominent in that same area as where Rennes-le-Chateau lies, which is in southwest France. And Rennes-le-Chateau is, for those who may not know, is a small, strange little hilltop village in southwest France. It's very near to the Spanish border, within 2 hours of the Spanish border. So it's way down. I guess the nearest fairly large city would be Toulouse. It's about an hour and a half on south of Toulouse, and it's about a 30 to 45-minute drive to the walled medieval city of Carcassonne. So there's lots of things going on in that area. Lots of remnants of Romans, Knights Templar. There's so many Templar preceptories, or ruins at least, of Templar preceptories down there. It makes you wonder, why were they guarding that area so closely? But anyhow, the sort of mystery really sparked over a story of a priest called Bérenger Saunière, who in the late 1890s was sort of relegated. I kind of got the impression he was a little bit of a renegade priest, possibly, and they sort of relegated him to this remote hilltop village. Well, the mystery started boiling around him suddenly coming into a lot of money and spending lots of money in the region and that sort of thing. Some of that has been embellished a bit over time. So you kind of have to really dig to find what actually was real about that. But anyhow, the story went that he was having the church renovated. And when they discovered something in the crypt Now, we don't know what that was, but he
Mm-hmm.
immediately sent the workers away, shut off the renovations, and after that is when he became fabulously wealthy. And
Mm-hmm.
so there have been many, many years since then of people trying to find out exactly what it was. Some people said it was information documents, genealogies, things like that. Other people, say it was a treasure of gold. Some people say it was a Visigothic treasure. But, also people speculate as to exactly who is buried in the crypt in the church at Rennes-le-Chateau. And, it's always going to be some royalty or aristocracy, nobility
Mm-hmm.
in a church like that. So there's been lots of speculation. Could it be Mary Magdalene? Could it be Jesus and Mary Magdalene? Because there are legends that Mary Magdalene came to the area, and also that Jesus, escaping the crucifixion, came to the area. And I mean, you talk to some of the locals, the just the salt of the earth people, the farmers, the people in the community, and a lot of them are still sort of tied to the Cathar. They have a real family connection to the Cathars, and also they say, well, of course, Mary Magdalene, she was here, and Jesus too, and the children, they played in the meadow, and you're going like, oh, okay, it was very matter of fact,
Sure, yeah.
And so anyway, so that just adds, to the swirling mysteries. There's a Holy Grail connection. There's all kinds of things that are tied in, and other mysteries, are being tied in. And that's, I know we're going to go there a little bit later, but things like the Oak Island mysteries, have now been tied to Rennes-le-Chateau. And I think they made some minor discovery in Oak Island and found like a metal brooch or something, or maybe it was a coin, but it was definitely traced to having been minted and mined in the region of Rennes-le-Chateau. But there are other connections that people have made through, their research of different people, especially specific families. But anyhow, I kind of went crazy over the whole thing, as a lot of people do.
Sure.
And I mean, some people really do lose it over this mystery. I've actually seen people lose their minds and be taken away in a straitjacket over getting so close to the answer, and they stayed up, and they ended up staying up for days and just totally had a psychotic break.
Sure.
There are people that are down there who have left their jobs in Paris and moved down to the mountainside and now are living out in a shack or a tent on the side of the mountain. It's just a very, very different kind of area. We have Mount Bugarash there also, Pic de Bugarash, and it was, the inspiration for Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and also Steven Spielberg has been there, and it was said to have been part of the inspiration for Close Encounters. Lewis Carroll, Through the Looking Glass. That is supposed to be about Rennes-le-Chateau. Somehow there's a Narnia connection to Rennes-le-Chateau. So it's like all these other mysteries somehow lead back to Rennes-le-Chateau. And so far, no one has figured out the whole thing. And I'm not sure anybody ever will.
Yeah, it could take a long time.
Yeah. I'm heading back over actually in a month, going over for, I'm doing a tour over there. It's starting on Easter Sunday. and finishing up the following weekend. But I'm going to stay a couple of months so that I can do some digging and some trekking
Sure.
around and things like that. But,
Now, of course, we all have to compensate for the 2 wacky years of the COVID thing when
yeah,
things were shut down. But how often, under normal circumstances, do you make it over to France?
usually twice a year.
Hmm.
Uh, and then I try to stay, for at least a month,
Oh, there you go. That's the way to
if
travel.
not longer.
Yeah, I subscribe to that too. When you go, try to stay as long as you can because that's how you really see and get to know a place.
Yeah, I like to try to feel like a local if I can. I like
Hmm.
to try to just blend in and just, go about my business there and just sort of feel the place. But yeah, it's yeah, a lot of people, they'll say, I'm going to be out of town, and they'll go, oh, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to France. And they go, oh, wow,
Right.
like it's some, you know, big deal. And like, it sounds very fancy and all that.
Yeah.
But, I've got it down to a science now.
Yeah. Sure.
First
Yeah.
of all, I've gone so many times over so many years that I know people, I have a lot of friends there. And in
Hmm.
fact, my research partner uh, lives there. And so I've got places to stay when I go.
There you
And
go.
so it's really just the flight. And I've figured out a killer way to get there from Los Angeles.
Hmm.
There are direct flights into Barcelona,
Okay.
and they cost about a third for some
Oh.
reason of what the flights would cost if I flew into Toulouse, which is
Hmm.
about an hour closer. But like Toulouse is maybe an hour and a half drive down to where I stay, and Barcelona is about a 2.5 hour drive up. So
Yeah.
I just I've got it down to a science. I jump off the plane, I grab a cab, go
Yep.
across down to the bus station, and then head up to I get up as far as Perpignan, which is about an hour from my friends, and they pick me up in Perpignan. And so it's very routine. The first time I did it, I was like, oh, what if I miss my bus? What if I do this? But I've got it down now. So it's really a very cheap vacation for me. And
Oh,
it's a really
excellent.
if I can work too. So I
I've
don't
only been to France twice. It was years ago, and I spent a total of only 8 days in France, but I've never had a bad day in France.
oh
And there's a lot of Americans who they go, "Oh, I hate France," and I don't get it. I think they don't under they don't understand travel because both
yeah,
times I went to France, I loved it. The people were wonderful.
yeah.
Um,
The
so
people, yeah, get a bad rap for being snobbish or unfriendly. And but it's like anywhere you go, it kind of
Mhm.
pays to do just a tiny bit of research before you go and figure out,
Yep.
what is expected or not expected,
Right.
what's rude or not rude. And I tell you, uh, I always have good luck because they totally appreciate you if you try to speak French. You
Bingo.
don't have to speak French, but if you just try, and then if you're very apologetic that you don't, they'll take over and they will go to the end
Exactly.
of the earth for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of places that if you just make the effort to initiate your conversation in the local language, that goes a long way in
It
France,
does.
especially, but in other places around Europe and around the world, because they're going to know if they can't tell by looking at you. Um, the minute those words come out of your mouth, they're going to go, "Oh, a traveling American," but you know what? They're trying, and
Yeah.
that really says a lot. And I'm with you for different reasons because I did 90% of my world travel on my job.
Yeah.
And in that job, I had to blend locally as much as possible. So, I would do my study before going if it was the first time, make sure I dressed like a local male, my age, whatever age I was at the time. In Greece and other places in Europe, I would get confused for locals a lot. They would initiate to me in the local language, and I'd be
Yeah.
like, but it does, you're right. They realize, hey, this is a person who's trying. This is a person who's not the typical, as they say, ugly American walking around in a sweatshirt with a big American flag, acting like they're at Epcot and Disneyland. These are real places where these real people are living, and
Yeah,
it's
that's their
not
home,
a playground. But
I do
go
know a lot of travelers, it's almost like they feel like the locals are invisible and they're invisible. So they're just in their crowd and they're being
yeah,
loud or they're doing this, that, or shoving into a venue or something.
yeah.
And it's like there's a disconnect there somehow. But one guy told me you can always tell the Americans with all their bright colors.
Mm-hmm.
And I got onto that right away. So when I'm there, I'm dressed in, browns, grays,
There you
jeans,
go.
maybe black, but I don't wear a lot of bright colors. I'll wear colors, but
Well, and
not
not to make people
or anything like that.
Yeah, not to make people paranoid when they travel, because I highly encourage travel, particularly for more Americans. But,
Oh,
bright colors and a loud mouth will draw criminals and potentially terrorists to you faster
you.
than anything. So, people might want to think about blending a little bit more, being a little bit more low key. But to bring it
Right.
back to Rennes-le-Chateau,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, and we're going to be getting into the California, what I think is the California
Connection.
connection here in a moment. But I just wanted to, because you brought up the various mysteries about the place,
Yeah.
and one of them, I have one of my wild speculations, and this was a result of my Napoleon research. It is my hypothetical opinion that because of all the Merovingian connection, I think that the big mystery that part of the big mystery that Saunier discovered, you talk about genealogies,
Mm.
is something that in the 1890s they were still very sensitive about, and that was a Bonaparte heir. I think part of what Saunier found was proof that Napoleon Bonaparte was indeed the Merovingian heir during his lifetime, which I argue in my book, Esoteric Napoleon. And to take it further, there is someone who I'm convinced, was an ancestor of his through his mother's side. And I think that's who might be buried, or was or is buried in the crypt. And that is a little known figure named Princess Albswinda. Albswinda was a Merovingian daughter, and she was kidnapped and taken to Italy, and then it's believed Constantinople. And I hypothetically suggest that she or her remains were returned to France, and that might be who was discovered, and that would serve to back up the claim that Napoleon was truly the Merovingian heir to that throne. Which, in my opinion, is what scared the hell out of the dynasties of Europe at the time, because they knew this secret. And Albswinda, through his mother, would be just further inarguable evidence of that. So there's my hypothesis that it has more
Mm.
to do with the Bonapartes. As a descendant of Mary Magdalene, Mary Magdalene's in there, but I think people get wrapped up in that it has so much to do with Christ that maybe it had more to do with Mary Magdalene and her descendants leading to Napoleon than it did Christ directly.
So you feel that Mary Magdalene was Merovingian?
I think she had. I think she's in the background of the Merovingians. Yeah,
That's wild. Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know that I've heard that before, but that is
That-
very interesting,
That's why I
especially
said it's a wild hypothesis.
yeah. My
But
cousin recently, not couple, 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, I don't know. But anyway, he got really interested in my mother's side of our family genealogy. And so he hired a genealogist, and he did some of the work himself, a real smart guy. Anyway, and he sent me my mother's, so-called pedigree, and it connected to Merovec by direct line. I think he's like my 53rd great grandfather.
Okay.
And, what was weird was there were other people in my history, or in my family history, that connect directly to all this stuff. And
wow. Okay, cool.
I had no idea. I never really was interested in having my genealogy done, because I just figured it would be boring and I'd be disappointed, and, it'd just be a bunch of, blacksmiths or something, where there would be no information available. The only thing good about being related to, prominent people is that there's lots of information, or at least some information that you can find. But if your, ancestor, as many of mine were just a regular guy, then, there's not much that you can find aside from, census, or, church records,
right,
and things like that, births and deaths, and that's about it.
Right.
But what was really weird was my cousin wasn't into any of this. He didn't know anything. He didn't know who the Merovingians were, or any of that stuff. But it was really interesting who turned up in that line. I never suspected, but a lot of them were around that area of southern France, which I always wondered, did I have some sort of a genetic draw to that area? I've always been drawn to France, and I just thought, well, maybe that's, maybe I've got some kind of genetic memory or something.
Sure. I think there's a lot to the genetic memory idea, and I think it could totally inspire and lead someone to follow the trail of what turns out to be their own roots. That to me just makes sense. I'm sure you've experienced, when you're traveling, turning a corner and there's a place that you recognize, but you've never been to.
Right.
In your lifetime, but you recognize that. Now, some people would say, oh, that's evidence of past lives. That's deja vu, that, you've been there in a past life. I argue that, and I said this with Joseph Farrell last week, just like we can inherit hair color, eye color, facial features, and the like, why not memory? That could be an actual genetically inherited memory from an ancestor who had been. I experienced this in a little village called Rudesheim in Germany, outside of Wiesbaden. I'm walking around there. I turn a corner, and there's a place that, okay, I know this place, but this is the first time I've ever been here. And so, it doesn't surprise me that, what you're saying, the possibility that because you do have a connection there, you feel very comfortable there.
Right. And interestingly, my research partner has, a lot of connections to that area too. And our genealogies crisscross, cross over each other's lines. We're related to each other and on several different levels, which, of course, we had no idea about. But there was something when I first met him that was like click, and I mean, we're sort of an odd, combo. He's a young gay white guy, I'm an old lady in California, but there's a connection there that is just so strong.
Sure.
I just can't describe it. It was like, meeting a family member, long lost family.
Right.
And that's true, I guess.
And you discovered that he is long lost family. You do have these connections. So, I don't think anybody and I'm speaking to you materialists, I don't think anybody can just easily explain that kind of thing away.
Yeah.
It's just one of those mysteries of life in reality that are intended to not be easily explained away in the material sense. So that is fascinating that you have literally discovered, a traceable ancestral connection to
Yeah.
these areas that you were drawn to. I mean,
Exactly. And
that's got to be fascinating to
30
experience.
years later, I found out about the connection, after I started researching. So it's like, wow, I'm kind of glad I didn't know
Hmm.
beforehand, because I had no skin in the game, literally,
Hmm.
in my research. So it wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have said, oh, I hope the Merovingians, did this, or I hope, so, might have tried to, in my own head, uh, you know, sort of frame it, or slant it in a
Sure.
direction. In this way, I just did pure, straight out
There you go.
research, because I had no idea about
Yeah,
any of
you
it.
did it. You did it objectively through the
Mhm.
oblivion to your own connection there, and
Yeah,
and I think that says a lot, and probably that helped with turning up a lot of info in a genuine way that serves the personal connection that you subsequently found out. I mean, that's really something that you were into this for 30 years, you said, before you
yeah, at
discovered.
least, yeah, 30 years.
Oh, wow. That's something.
It,
Y
yeah,
you know, th
I just really didn't want to know, and I wouldn't have probably ever done it. Um, and now I think that was stupid of me. But my cousin did it unbeknownst to me. It
mm,
was all done by the time I found out about it, and he sent it over to me. And then I was just like, "Ah," I was sputtering. I was going, "Do you know who this is? Oh my God, these are the people that research. These are some people in France." And, and he was going like, "I don't know who they are."
that's
Just
wild. See, that to me is even more bona fides of what you're saying because it's a relative who did this, again, the word oblivious, who did this unaware of the
yeah.
details of your research. So that
But I
there's
will
objectivity
say
there.
that
Mhm.
relative I have lured over there, and he's wanting to go back. So it's like it's my friend, the late Tim Wallace Murphy,
Mhm.
very well known author in this
Yes, oh, yeah.
area.
Mhm.
Um, he called it the glue pot. You get stuck. You don't want to leave. You cannot leave,
Yeah.
or if you leave, you will come back. It'll snap you back.
Well, I would imagine. I mean, the beauty of the south of France alone would keep, most people, me wanting to go back there. But you're right. When you also layer in this particular mystery and all these things, and then when, like you say, a personal connection to the area, yeah, I would be
Yeah.
spending, if I were you, I think I would be spending like 6 months of the year there. I wouldn't be
Well,
able to
I'm headed in
resist.
that direction. I'm headed in that direction without
Hmm.
having to apply for residency. I can go 3 months and
Hmm.
then come back for 3 months and then go back 3 months. You can only stay 90 days unless you apply
Right.
for an extended visa, which I could. And at some point, I feel like I will be there permanently, and that I feel like I'm headed in that direction.
There
Just
you
waiting
go.
for kids
There
to
you
get
go.
more independent and trying to
Sure.
figure out what to do with
That
all
makes
these
sense.
dogs.
That makes there you go. Yeah. So let's venture into this potential California connection that I've been kind
Yeah.
of hinting at with you over the years, and in particular, it involves Mount Rubidoux. What is technically a hill because it's a few feet short of being officially a mountain, but it's always been referred to as Mount Rubidoux. And in my Empire of the Wheel research, I kept finding things and seeing things that suggested a knowledge of the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery, a local knowledge. And here's what's interesting. At the time the things that hint at this were constructed, I don't I don't believe that the Saunier mystery was known widely, certainly not outside of France. This would have
Right.
been between the 1890s and 1937 in particular. So when was the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery not widely known in the States until the Bejant and Lincoln book in the 80s, or was it known before then?
I don't think it was really widely known, and I don't think it was even widely known that much after the I mean, because it was, wasn't that prominent in the book, but it did cause people to go and start visiting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, of course, again, it all really exploded in, I think what was it, 2006 with
Mm-hmm.
the Da Vinci Code, because the Da
Right.
Vinci Code is connected to Rennes-le-Chateau. One of the main characters, Lee Teabing, is an
Mm-hmm.
anagram of the Holy Blood authors, Bajent and Lincoln's names.
Mm-hmm.
So that was definitely a nod to them uh,
Mm-hmm.
and their research. But yeah, and then just, since then, hundreds of thousands of people have, come over and, to see what this little tiny village is all about and see if
Right.
they can solve the mystery.
So
But
so
what
the
was it about the Mount Rubidoux that was the first thing you saw that said that's
that
got to do with Rennes-le-Chateau?
that made me wonder was specifically what's called the Peace Tower, which was constructed in, I believe, 1937. It was when it was finished. And it was built in honor of a man named Frank Miller, who was a hotelier and philanthropist in Riverside, California. And he's the founder and builder of the popular Mission Inn, which you've probably heard about and maybe
Yeah.
even visited. It wasn't actually a mission. It was a hotel inspired by the Spanish revival architecture that was very popular here in Southern California in the late 19th and going into the 20th centuries. And when I saw the Peace Tower, it's a round tower and it has another little miniature tower, and just its placement, the vibe I got, I immediately thought, whoa, this has kind of a physical similarity to uh, uh,
Tour Magdala.
Rennes-le-Chateau. Yeah,
Yeah.
Tour Magdala, and of course, the name of the mountain, Rubidoux, is named after a local immigrant rancher from France. And I
It was
wrote about this.
French, yeah.
Yeah, I wrote about this in my Secret Missions book about Juan Cabrillo, because I explored the possibility that there was a Templar vault hidden inside Mount Rubidoux. But here's the background. It was named for Louis Robidoux, Robidoux, who had a French Canadian background. The Robidoux family's origin is in, uh, forgive my pronunciation if I get this wrong, Auvergne, Auvergne. You familiar with Auvergne, France?
No, I'm not. Do you know where it is? What
Oh
area?
boy! At the time I wrote this book, I knew where it was off the top of my head. Um, that's where his
Probably
family
Auvergne.
historically is from, Auvergne, and but his father and his family, they had already gone to Quebec by the time of that generation. Um, Louis Robideau was actually born in the States in St. Louis, Missouri, and he came to California and he owned big ranch property around what is now Riverside. And what's interesting is I wondered why they changed the spelling of the name if it was named after him to Rubidaux, Rubidoux. That's how we get the Rubidoux. And
Right.
what's interesting is it looks like somebody in the U.S. Geologic Survey changed the spelling, because I found an entry for 1898, what's called a USGS decision card,
Oh,
submitted on the 28th of July, 1898, citing Rubidoux, spelled with a U, as the local usage, as well as the spelling that they decided to go with prior to that date. Now, the California Mining Bureau and U.S. Land Office spelled it more traditionally French, Rubideau, not with the OUX. And there's all this stuff, the documentation, but I analyzed the spelling Rubidoux, okay, which is the current place spelling here,
Right.
and what everybody knows about it. Oh, yeah. And I did a little etymological deconstruction, and I broke the word apart. I split the name into Rue Bideau, okay? R-U, first part. Second part, B-I-D-O-U-X. And of course, R-U could be R-U-E, which is street, right?
Street, yeah.
In French, which left with the Bideau, okay? There is no street, there is no Bideau Street that I could ever find, either in France or Canada. So then I took the X off because BIDOU means money. So, okay. But that doesn't account for the X in there. But if you split it up to Ruby, R-U-B-I,
right.
Second word, D-O-U-X, rubis is French for ruby, right? And D-O-U-X means sweet. So you end up with
sweet ruby.
Yeah, or sweet berries, perhaps.
I was going to say maybe it's berries, yeah.
Yeah, so there's no berries growing on or near Mount Rubidoux. So, there is the possibility that, some type of precious stones. I considered that, but I came eventually to
maybe some blue apples.
Well, there's the blue apple thing, right? Well, I came to get this. I went back to the Rue, R-U, and then B-I-D-O-U-X is the second word. And here's what I found. A house in France called Les Bidoux, B-I-D-O-U-X, Les Bidoux.
In there.
In Ribérac, right? Or Ribérac?
No.
Ribérac, a commune in Dordogne, southwestern France.
Oh, yeah.
Between the Pyrenees and the Loire Valley, as you know. Les Bidoux is located in Périgord and dates back to the era of the Gauls. Périgord comes from the word petrochor, the Gaulish word for 4 tribes. Now, there's a link to Mount Rubidoux with 4 tribes. Now, here's this place in France.
It's Périgord, not Périgord?
It's
this is another E-A-U-X.
It's spelled P-E-R-I-G-O-R-D.
Oh, Périgord.
Okay.
Right.
Périgord. Okay. And it comes from the Gaulish word petrochor, meaning 4 tribes. Now get this. That's over in France, this 4 tribe association. Mount Rubidoux is known to be where 4 local native tribes, their lands come together in Riverside, all at the foot of Mount Rubidoux.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So in France, it's connected to petrochor, which means 4 tribes. And here in Riverside, it has long been known as the place where the lands of 4 native tribes, 4 tribes. So I thought, my gosh, okay, somebody naming Rubidoux, somebody knowing something about Rubidoux has to know about what's the French connection there, right? And of course, maybe that's why they named it after Louis Robideau. Maybe that's why Louis Robideau came here to this area. I don't know. So there was a red flag for me right there.
Yeah. Did you find anything regarding the naming of the Peace Tower? Who named it? Why it was named that? Or
it was we are told that it was a group of local citizens, philanthropists, business people who wanted to honor Frank Miller, this man who founded and built the very popular Mission Inn,
and
owned
the tower.
Well, the Peace Tower, that's all they referred to it as. It's the Peace Tower.
It's interesting. Now, are you familiar with the International Peace Garden?
No.
It's on the border. It straddles the border of Canada and the United States. And I don't know if you've ever run across a guy, another researcher and author. He's been on a couple shows like Oak Island, named Court
Hmm.
Lindahl. And
No.
his thing is he's among other things a cartographer, and he has drawn all these connections similarly, I guess, to Henry Lincoln's pentagrams and things that
Hmm.
he's found in the region. But he's linked up different sites, uh, and they all end up somehow being related to Rennes-le-Chateau. And one of them is the International Peace Garden.
Oh,
And there's a lot of what he's done is he's gone to places, a lot of places that have octagonal towers, and the
okay.
towers, seem to be pointing, like you can go in a direct line through the point of the towers, and it points to certain things.
Hmm.
I'm just wondering if the Peace Tower, was named such.
Wow. Here we
Just
go.
shot in the dark.
Here we go. Here we go. Actually, I was wrong. It was built in 1925, and it was
wasn't. There still wouldn't have
yeah,
been a lot of info.
right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
people wouldn't have known Rennes-le-Chateau.
No,
It's allegedly modeled after a bridge in Alcantara, Spain. Now, get this. Here I found it. You asked me the question, and here it's in my book from 2014. The Peace Tower in Riverside was reportedly the first monument dedicated to the ideal of international peace. And I put that in quotes.
And I just said International Peace Garden.
Yes, you did. And here it is in my book from 2014. Here's another interesting little side note. This is from my book. Frank Miller, the builder of Mission Inn and the man who the Peace Tower was built for. He was deeply moved to the philosophy of peace and all that following the loss of his friend, Elbert Hubbard, the controversial artist writer who lost his life on the Lusitania. Now, Elbert Hubbard, my friends, was the uncle or grandfather of L. Ron Hubbard, another very controversial
Get out
figure.
of here.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, but there's your international peace. That's just and let me see what source I got that from. I got that from the Mission Inn Museum titled Hands on History, which is at missioninmuseum.com if you're interested.
Yeah.
And it's the Evergreen Memorial Historic Cemetery site as well. So I'm wondering between the two of us, if we looked in who built that garden and when it was built, if there's not, some type of connection.
Some connection.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Court. He's researched it like crazy already.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's not, other places that are connected. But what I'm going to do is ask him to. Do you have the coordinates of the Peace Tower?
Not handy.
They might be gettable online.
Oh, I'm sure they are. In fact, if you look up the Peace Tower on Wikipedia, they always have the coordinates there.
Oh, right. So he can look to see if there's anything pointing from the International Peace Garden or vice versa, where they point back.
Another thing, you and I had been talking about you coming out and taking a look, yourself, you guys coming out, and that was before the silly quarantine era. So now that we're beyond that, we got to get you out here to Riverside to do the walk up. We can meet you guys, and we can do the walk up Rubidoux that's very popular, and go right to the Peace Tower. And you can get a real close look yourself, and you guys can also see the Mission Inn, which you would have, if you haven't been to the Mission Inn. There are things in there that again I point out in this book, Empire of the Wheel 3, that have a thematic relation to this stuff. Basically, in my Secret Missions 1, I proposed the possibility that Juan Cabrillo became a Templar, and he didn't really die. He faked his death, and then he came to Riverside. He came inland to California, to what is now Riverside, and retrieved what I suspect was the sword. What I propose was the lost sword of Joan of Arc that had been brought to the Americas centuries before by one of Joan of Arc's Templar brothers, and had been moved across North America from one Templar vault site to the next. As the population grew in North America, they would move their vaults westward, and that Roubidoux contained one of these vaults. And so there's your French association to Mount Roubidoux right there, as well as this intrigue behind the very name of Mount Roubidoux and such. And that might be why there was all this French connection to Mount Roubidoux, because Louis Robideau might have, through family connections or whatever, might have been aware of what was in. And for all we know, the tower might mark some type of association to, my hypothesis of the vault. But the important thing is right now, I think, is I'll bet you that you would find a connection between this International Peace Tower and this International Peace Garden that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what it's popped right up whenever you said it. Juan Cabrillo, was he from Spain?
That was always a mystery. Spain claimed him. Portugal claimed him. The United States has always officially recognized Juan Cabrillo as Portuguese. And in my book, this one here, Secret Missions 1, I lay out my hypothesis. I point out, and I go into detail, why I think that Juan Cabrillo was the son of Pedro Cabral, the Portuguese explorer credited with claiming what is now Brazil for Portugal. And Juan Cabrillo appeared on the historic record at 19, 20 years old or so. And that basically places him being born sometime around 1500 or within a year after Pedro Cabral claimed Brazil. Okay. And so I argue that Pedro Cabral had a child with either a Portuguese woman or a Spanish woman. I argue Portuguese in the Americas, and that's why we can't find any record of Juan Cabrillo's birth in Europe to this day, because it wouldn't be there. If he was born in Brazil in those days, we wouldn't find a record. And he would indeed, as the son of Pedro Cabral, I even do an etymological analysis showing that Cabrillo, it means son of Cabral. And that's all in my book. So I argue that Juan Cabrillo was Portuguese in the service of the Spanish army. And there were a lot of Portuguese in the service of the Spanish army, particularly the Navy, because they were master navigators.
Templars there. There were Templars in Portugal as well.
Oh, yeah. King Dennis basically told the King of France and the Vatican to go pound sand. He was not going to arrest any Templars that were in Portugal. In fact, he told the Templars, I'm going to create a new order. This was during the Templar persecution. He goes, I'm going to create a new order. We're going to call it the Order of Christ. And all you Templars, you're in the Order of Christ. Pedro Cabral was a known, documented member of the Order of Christ, essentially a Templar. There's also this, I'm doing a brain dump on the term, Hidalgo de Sangre specifically. Hidalgo was what they would call men who were knights in the Spanish or Portuguese vernacular. And Hidalgo de Sangre had a very specific application. That was used only for men, knights who were known to be descendants of authentic Templars. So if Pedro Cabral was Hidalgo de Sangre, his male offspring would have also have been Hidalgo de Sangre, Knights by Blood, or Templars. And that's how I argue that Juan Cabrillo became officially a Templar eventually because he was Hidalgo de Sangre. But the French connection to all this would be the sword of Joan of Arc to this Roubidoux vault.
My research partner, James Martin, had uncovered a document somewhere. I don't know where. He's got access to a lot of academic archives I don't have access to. But he found a document in Portugal and held these stamps on it and seals and things. One of them was a circular thing, and it was letters around it. Anyway, it read Portugal, which Graal is Grail.
Yes.
And so we were like, what's that all about? And then there was a lot of, Templar stuff uncovered in Portugal.
Right.
Treasures and things like that. But
it's interesting that some scholars, students of Homer, believe that when Odysseus goes to the place where he enters the land of the dead, which is one of my favorite chapters in the Odyssey, that entrance, the land of the dead entrance, is to be found in Portugal, which is, I just find that a delicious little tidbit, which I need to pull all the threads on.
I wonder where, I wonder, does the country know other indicators?
It would, well, if you went directly to the Odyssey, I think obviously it would be somewhere on, near the coast, right? Because Odysseus was sailing, trying to get back home. And so, if you're really, and admittedly, I have not pulled the full thread on that. My mentor is the one who first turned me on to that idea. The land of the dead is in Portugal. So, but people will say, if they're just logging in now, they'll say, why are you talking about Portugal with all this? Well, the Templars, who are, a French order, they were in Portugal for a reason. You got to wonder what that reason was. And so, there is, and the Templars, they of course have a history with the Cathars, and the Templars have a history with, the whole Mary Magdalene thing and all of this, so wherever the Templars are, you really need to look closely when you're talking about the history behind Rennes-le-Chateau, I think.
And it's interesting what you said about, Portugal, saying, go pick rocks. We're not arresting anybody. We're not arresting. By the same token, King Alfonso of Spain at that same time donated his whole kingdom to the Knights Templar. And of course, they had a safe haven there. And I believe that they were called the Poor Knights of Christ. After that.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. And that whole thing, the Templar thing. And, I'm one of those that I know people point to the Templars. Some people villainize the Templars mainly for their association to what became international banking and the banking cartels and potentially Illuminati type stuff. And others believed the Catholic Church Vatican propaganda, which they subsequently came out and said, yeah, that was just a bunch of propaganda. We lied about them to demonize them. But there's people who still believe that.
That wasn't that long ago.
I know that they admitted that. Oh, well, think about it. They also admitted that they were lying all these years about Mary Magdalene, calling her a prostitute. I mean, which pope was it that said, "Oh, she wasn't really a prostitute"? Basically, we had to slander her because of our misogynistic patriarchal church. Don't get me started on the Vatican.
She was actually a woman of means, and quite possibly and quite probably she was funding things.
She was brilliant and a very special person. And, but we all know how Rome the Vatican. We know that. That's a whole other,
Well,
series of shows that
that
we
was
could
that
list their
bunch of guys
sins.
down at the Council of Nicaea, you know, they
So,
got stuck for 2,000 years with their freaking ideas and
yeah,
insanity.
just like the British historians and the European monarchies for 200 years, the slander against Napoleon that they leveled. Just well, anyway, I talk
You know,
about that
I
in the
think
Napoleon book.
my first introduction, I think, to Napoleon was as a little kid when
Hmm.
they would always have a Napoleon character in cartoons. That you would always see him with his hand inside his coat,
Yeah.
and he
Hmm.
would always be like cuckoo. You
Right.
know, his hat would always be
Yeah.
askew, and he always looked. They made him out to be like a complete nutter.
And when
Well,
you really dig
what
into it,
do
that's part of the propaganda. Oh, I'm glad Napoleon re-entered this, because one of the other clues of connection to Rennes-le-Chateau, is my understanding, is the symbology of the bee is connected to this mystery. Well, as we know, Napoleon, his number one symbol was the Merovingian bee. So even Napoleon himself believed he was a
Yeah,
Merovingian.
that's true. That's true. Yeah,
So,
there are bees everywhere down there. I mean, like bee uh, jewelry, bee, you know, paintings, bee.
mhm.
Well, I guess it's not. I guess it's not close enough at hand, but I have a bee a painting. Oh, here it is. I've got to show this to you.
Oh yes, absolutely.
This my friend painted it.
Oh, nice. That's
It's a
very nice.
bee,
There you
and
go.
she knows I have a thing for bees.
There
And
you
of
go.
course, with those little golden bees that you find everywhere, and they're like kind of good luck or something. But now, wasn't it Napoleon that had the bees sewn around
Yes.
his? Yeah.
He actually, when the tomb of, not Clotilda. Clotilda's connected to the whole Abswinda thing I talked about, but Kilderic, is that the one of the Merovingian monarchs? They literally
Derek,
removed
yeah.
literally had the little golden bee things removed from the tomb, and that's what was sewn on one of his
Wouldn't
capes.
it have been Clovis and
Maybe Clovis, yeah, because Clovis, Kilderic, and Clotilda are
Clovis
all in the
was
mix.
of the Merovingian
Yeah, so it
cycle?
was literally the Merovingian actual bees that the Merovingian monarch had worn, that Napoleon adopted. See, another thing that I learned when I was doing my Napoleon research was there's a little bit of question and mystery as to who really fathered him and his older brother Joseph, because they looked remarkably like each other, so much so that Joseph likely doubled for Napoleon for security purposes in the past, and Joseph is documented by multiple witnesses to have pleaded with Napoleon to switch places with him. Okay, in Rochefort, I think, before Napoleon was arrested by the British. And that's the basis for the theory didn't originate with me. There's long been a theory that Napoleon switched places with his brother Joseph and came to America. So, in other words, when Joseph Bonaparte is documented in American history as to being in America between 1815 and 1840, I think,
It
it
might
was
have really
actually
been.
I believe it was Napoleon himself. They look so much alike, but they didn't look so much like their younger siblings. So it may be, and I talk about this in my book, Esoteric Napoleon, it may be that
They had different.
Charles Bonaparte, Carlo Bonaparte, Charles Bonaparte was the father of the younger
Yeah.
kids, but not Napoleon and Joseph. So who was his father? I go into that in my book. His father might have been an undercover or a Merovingian or a former Templar or whatever who was trying to lay low. And his mother was a known Merovingian or suspected Merovingian heir, so to speak, through Abswinda.
I wonder if anybody's ever done DNA on Napoleon. Like I know Marie Antoinette, they, did DNA on her, and
Well, and the funny thing is, if you've been, in Paris, the Pantheon, right, the big crypt where Napoleon's crypt is in
Mhm.
Paris. I think I'm getting that right. It's just like the place in Rome. It's called the Pantheon. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. I apologize. It's right up the street from the Sorbonne Academy. But Joseph's remains, I believe, are also buried there in a lesser crypt. And I argue that the irony is it's Joseph in Napoleon's coffin and Napoleon in Joseph's coffin, both there in Paris. But
Wow.
so the bodies are there. They could easily do the DNA. And because
But
they're
how would we know whose DNA it was? Would it be Napoleon's or would it be Joseph's?
I'm not technically savvy enough with DNA to know, but there were several, a handful of Bonaparte, nephews and nieces and descendants that were here in the United States. There was Charles Bonaparte, born in Baltimore, Maryland, he was Secretary of the Navy for a
Mm.
time, and then he became the Attorney General of the United States, who founded, by the way, the Bureau of Investigation, which in the 1920s became the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Oh.
And he was the grandson of Napoleon's nephew. And there were other Bonapartes who could have qualified to be
Or
an heir.
was it Napoleon's son?
No, no, no. Charles Bonaparte was definitely the son of one of Napoleon's nephews, I believe.
Oh, not
Yeah.
not Joseph's.
No, 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 no.
Oh. I was thinking because if he was Joseph's, we still wouldn't know if he was Joseph's kid or
Well,
if
see,
he was Napoleon's.
I argue that Joseph was the one on the island on Helena, however you pronounce it. That they now even the British historian who was sent by England to Helena to spend a long time there to interview what I call the Bonaparte prisoner. And even he reported back, I don't think this is Napoleon. I think this is Joseph. So even
Really?
in the life of allegedly Napoleon in exile, even the Brit who was sent to him suspected this is not Napoleon. This is Joseph. But we are, of course, taught to believe that they didn't switch places.
That's
But this
funny.
is a
Did he
theory
give
that
any indication as to what made him feel that way?
it was getting to know him, talking about him more, talking with him more, and little things. He goes into it a little bit
Oh, that's
in
cool.
his writings, but he came back and reported that he really thought this is not Napoleon. Now, remember, right before Napoleon was the Bonaparte exile was
Right.
arrested in Rochefort. Um, the British sent a man of war speeding as fast as they could in those days to America to patrol New York Harbor because they suspected at the time that Napoleon would flee to the United States because the United States let it be known that he was welcome there. The U.S. Navy had a frigate off of the coast of France at that time, and they sent two officers in a small launch to go retrieve Napoleon, get him on that frigate, and get him to the United States. And the British suspected this was going to happen. So the British suspected that there'd be a switcheroo pulled, and I'm convinced that they did. But this is why all of this paranoia over a Bonaparte emerging is because the oligarchies of Europe were scared to death of the Bonaparte heir, the Merovingian heir, because the Merovingian claim to most of the thrones of Europe preceded all the monarchies of Europe. Okay, so it was the first original claim to several thrones around Europe. So they were scared to death of this Bonaparte connection, and this is why I propose that in the 1890s, Saunier might have discovered the proof that Napoleon and any legitimate Bonapartes had a legitimate claim to, Europe. And at the time, think about it. If he would have gone when he went to Paris to his superiors and said, I know the truth here. Napoleon Bonaparte was legitimately who he said he was, and X number of heirs have a legitimate claim. How much is it worth to you? You can pay me a lot to shut me up or whatever, And so I think this might have had to do with Napoleon, and the fear of a Bonaparte heir might have been the secret of Rennes-le-Chateau. And yes, I think that means a descendant of Mary Magdalene, a blood descendant.
Wow. That's mind-blowing. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more. That is,
yeah, there may be. I could, I admit I could be way off. I could be wrong, but it's a possibility. That has to be considered.
Be great to look into it for sure.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's go ahead. Finish what you were going to say.
Just one quick thing. I know. We want to take some questions, but I met a lady. Oh my goodness, it's been like 15 years ago now, and she was well up into her 80s at the time, and she was the sort of informally adopted daughter of Marie Denarnaud, who was Saunier's housekeeper, confidant, and most likely lover. And I do think they have a child, and I do think that person is still alive. But anyway, met this lady. I'm sure she's gone now. But she used to go and visit Marie there at the Villa Britannia, the Saunier's house. And there was a legend, which you may have heard, or a story which said that, after Saunier died, that, and I don't remember exactly at what point, but that Marie was out in the garden burning money.
Yes.
Burning money up. And I guess it was supposed to have been like, burning French francs. Anyway, so when I met this lady, she somehow it came out that she was there when the things were being burned. And I said, she says, oh no, it wasn't money. It was documents. And I said, oh, wow. I said, don't you wish, we had those now? And the lady says, oh, no, they were against the church.
That's very, very interesting. I hate to sound like a broken record, but you mentioned when you said the name Marie, I forgot one of the biggest points I was going to bring up, and then I'll shut up for a while. Let people get questions. Here's a more direct Napoleonic connection to the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery. Duh, Walter, this is the big one. Okay. Marie de Hautpoul de Blanchefort.
Oh.
Right? Her grave marker, the Et in Arcadia ego, right, is directly connected to the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery. Now, it's either her cousin or her nephew was Colonel de Hautpoul. I'm getting goosebumps talking about this. Colonel de Hautpoul, who was an officer serving directly under Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay? He was related, a direct blood relative to Madame de Hautpoul de Blanchefort, who's at the heart of the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery. So here you have Colonel de Hautpoul, who's serving under Napoleon. Might he have known already who Napoleon really was relative to the Merovingian connection? Might he have known? Now, remember, he was also present when the Rosetta Stone was discovered, stumbled upon. Okay. And the Rosetta Stone, the dimensions of the Rosetta Stone, if I'm not mistaken, matched the dimensions, I think, of the Blanchefort, Madame de Hautpoul de Blanchefort's grave marker in question. So there is the de Hautpoul Rennes-le-Chateau direct connection to Napoleon through Colonel de Hautpoul.
Wow. I'm not going to go into it now because I've got a ton of stuff I just want to say right now about the Hautpouls, but we'll do that another time. We should some questions, but you just triggered some stuff for me as well.
Okay,
So
good, good.
we
I'm
could
glad
keep
that
drinking
resonates.
all day long.
So it looks like we're going to have another conversation about this. So let's now
We'll
go
do a
to
marathon.
let's go to the live chat. And remember, folks, um, your questions or comments to be acknowledged or answered must. It's required. Please listen to me, live chat. Listen to me. All caps, please. Okay. All caps. And ask away, folks. Renee's here. Ask her your questions. So as we're waiting for that first question
If I can,
to pop
well,
up,
if we're waiting, then I can just keep
do it.
going on the alt pools.
Yep.
Okay. Are you familiar with a village called Perilos?
Not off the top of my head.
People
No.
call it Perios, I guess, which is sort of the Spanish, but it's
Yeah.
Perillos.
Okay.
Very, very weird place. There's a weird church there that is strange. The town is deserted, but you can rarely go there. They've always got it cordoned off.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go there, if you manage to get through, they'll get you out of there pretty darn quick. But so there's this really weird little church that's there. And we were walking around and James had his little meters and things were measuring stuff. And he held it to the door of the church and it just went crazy.
Wow.
But however he was looking at his equipment there, he could see that there was something going back and forth behind that door. It was locked.
Wow.
And he said, he'd never seen anything like that. And it literally, went off the charts. But there's definitely in the village is Opal, which is another version of Opal. And the postcode of the village is 666.
Oh, it had to be. Wow. Wow.
People think I make that part up, but I guarantee you, just Google it.
Oh, wow. That's cool. That's cool. We have our first comment. D. Dorothy Pepino says, the lady mentioned was connected to a tower in Genoa, Spain. I refer to the City of Secrets. Are you familiar with that, Renee?
It's Girona, Spain. And she's talking about Patrice Chaplin's book called City of Secrets. But yes, there is a tower, and it is connected to the Magdalen Tower in France. I mean, there's a Saunier connection to it. So there's a acknowledged connection between the two. But yeah, Girona, Spain. Yeah, and that's not that far away from where we are either. In fact, I was just through Girona a couple months back. I was there and went, well, I guess I thought, but anyway, August
there's been kind of a lot made of Saunier's connection to occult circles in Paris, and not the least of which is the opera singer, is it Marie Calvé? Yeah, allegedly connected with all the occult circles, which, by the way, if you're interested in that, read Tobias Churton's book, Occult Paris. It's fascinating.
Emma
Calvé. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So what do you think of that? What are your thoughts or findings on the occult circle connection to Saunier?
Well, there does seem to be something there. And he did make a lot of trips, to Paris. There was that whole thing with the paintings at Saint-Sulpice and, that are somehow connected to the mystery. But, there were a lot of people that were connected to occult Paris. A lot of smart people like Benjamin Franklin and others. Jefferson spent a lot of time in France and down in the sort of region where I go. Spent lots of time down there, and I forgot the name of the town now. It's slipping my mind, but it's very nearby. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he knew and had friends. Now, there is a stone I believe I think it's the River Sal's in Rennes-le-Chateau near this place called the Source de Magdalene.
Hmm.
And it had a heart on it, and it with Emma Calvé's name or initials or something. And it was purported that it was done by Saunier and that he was having some kind of a relationship with Emma Calvé.
Right.
But I think that has been debunked. Not necessarily the relationship, although I think that's probably not true either. But the stone, I think the stone was a hoax. But
okay.
And I kind of think I kind of think the guys, the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, had something to do with it.
Yeah. What do you think of that statement? This place is terrible. What do you think of that relative to the Tour Magdala and the chapel?
Okay, well, if you look at that phrase, first of all, back in the days, terrible kind of
Right.
meant awesome,
Right. Yeah.
and not necessarily bad.
Hmm.
And if you look at the Bible verse, which I cannot tell you what it is right now, I want to say Isaiah, but I'm just pulling that out of the ethers, where it says the rest of the verse is something like, this place is terrible, and it is the gateway to heaven, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was from the Jacob's Ladder story.
Right. Okay.
That verse is within that story in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, there's a couple things. Okay, maybe terrible doesn't mean bad. Maybe
Right.
this place is awesome. Okay, well, what does that mean? That it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I met with the old mayor of Rennes-le-Chateau,
Mm-hmm.
and which is so cool, but it's never going to happen. But I have a signed agreement with the mayor on behalf of the commune to film underneath the church at Rennes-le-Chateau, and the contract has no term. So it's anytime that happens, or anytime I could get permission to get in there, I've already got like sole right to film it. Now, I'm sure that someone will argue with that. I'd probably lose, but anyway, it's kind of fun. But what the mayor said was, the real treasure of Rennes-le-Chateau is not jewels or golds or secret documents.
Mm-hmm.
It's telluric energy.
Wow. That one of my favorite research topics, right? But that opens. Oh yeah. I gotta get you.
Listen,
it's at the heart of my research in Latitude 33
me.
about Disneyland and Empire of the Wheel. Yeah.
Oh. And it's measurable. I mean, you don't have
Oh
to
yeah.
say, oh, I feel it.
Yes.
You do feel it, but you can also measure it. And it feels like it's almost well, I guess it would be, but like you can almost direct it,
Yes. Yes, you can.
Do you know about the Capitels in the neighboring village of Custosa that's right next to Rennes-le-Chateau? Anywhere, there's this field, and there are these little stone huts. I believe they talked about it in Holy Blood.
Okay.
And there are these little round huts, and nobody knows what they're for, but they're ancient, ancient, ancient. And so people kind of like, were they, was there something coming from the sky that they were trying to, protect themselves from? Some people said they were shepherd's huts, but they're not shepherd's huts. They don't resemble any other shepherd's huts. And anyway, we went up there, it's probably a couple of years ago now, and we're walking around, and I could like feel like energy. And I'm not one of those people that is psychic or anything. I mean, I'm one of those people that usually have to knock in the head with something. a skeptical nature, believe it or not, involved in all the wildness I am. I'm really pretty much of a skeptic and kind of analytical. But I just had this feeling, and I said to my friend Jay, I said, "Hey, come over here and point that at me. Point that meter at me."
Mm-hmm.
And so I just stood there and I held my hand, pointed at him, and I just kind of imagined or said to myself, the energy is going to come up through my feet and go out my finger.
Yep.
And he stood there and the meter was, kind of low, and then it just shot all the way. Couldn't even go
Yep.
high enough. Could not go high enough. He says,
Yeah.
"Oh my God." And I said, "Yeah, I don't think that's me. I think that's,
Oh, you were experiencing it.
yeah, I mean,
My
somebody,
regular viewers know, they've heard me talk about the experience I had on one of the peaks at Twin Peaks in San Francisco, where Seshari showed me a spot, and I experienced the energy coming up through my feet, up my legs, and up my sides and out to my fingertips. So I know what you're talking about. It's wild, and we're going to have to talk more about that when we meet up. And I show you some spots,
yeah.
because I had a telluric experience at the Peace Tower. In December of 2007, I had a physical healing experience there. But
You tell me about that. Yes, I remember that
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Yeah.
SB Alger asked, have you ever encountered the works of Tracy Twyman?
Oh, I knew Tracy.
Yeah,
Bless her heart.
yeah.
Yeah, Tracy was actually in my film Bloodline.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Also was behind me, because she did a lot of research into the Priory of Zion and
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. But yeah, so yes, I did know Tracy. I, got to be kind of friends not long before she left the plane. She had called me. She wanted to come down, and she had a little boy.
Mm-hmm.
She was worried about her safety.
Yeah. There.
Can't talk too much about that because I don't want to.
Right. There
Yeah.
has been some, I think, legitimate speculation regarding her tragic, story, which you're right,
Yeah.
we won't get into
It doesn't have
here.
anything to do with Rennes-le-Chateau.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Going back to Girona, D.
Yes.
Dorothy Papineau, something about ceremonies, a film producer and ceremonies that scared Patrice. I'm not sure who. D. Dorothy, if you could rephrase that.
Probably talking about L'Sanche. There's a secret group called L'Sanche in the region, and they are a little spooky. No, is it the L'Sanche group that does the procession on Magdalene Feast Day, and they all come out and they look like they're dressed in like clan costumes, except they're black.
Right. This sounds familiar.
The one in the front, the leader, is scarlet, his robes and pointy hat or scarlet.
Now,
streets.
Okay, you're going to like this. One of the pieces of lore associated with Mount Rubidoux is people have reported seeing figures in dark black robes in a single file walking up the trail on Mount Rubidoux. You got to get out here.
It's so weird. Well,
yeah.
It's so weird because just yesterday I was telling someone, because going back to France in the fall, taking a tour group. In fact, we're starting on October 13th, which of course is the big day for the Knights Templars being, disbanded supposedly. Anyway, only that was a Friday. I think this year it's on a Sunday. But on the 13th of October, every year, you can see people in white robes with torches climbing up Peshkardu, another well-known mountain that supposedly has something inside it there. But, you know, in commemoration of the Templars. And it's spooky looking, but it's so cool.
Yeah,
and I just asked James yesterday, are they still doing that to this day? He goes, I'm pretty sure they do.
Wow.
And I hope we can see it, you know, when we're there, because we're bringing a group of people that most.
Oh, that'd be something. That'd be a sight for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Todor Kolev asks, says, hi to Rene about Mount Bugaresh. How the locals explain the origins of the name of that Cathar stronghold. How do they, what's the etymology of the name there?
You know, I forgot. Obviously, it's not French. I don't know, but, you know, and I have to say, you know, obviously, they may know something I don't know. I don't know that Bugaresh was necessarily the stronghold of the Cathars. It was more Montsegur,
right,
in the Ariège. But I mean, honestly, there's no one person that knows everything.
Right.
And is it Todor? Could definitely be absolutely correct, just not in my knowledge. And I do know that, and I actually looked it up not that long ago about the name, and I cannot remember what it was. But I don't know any more than anyone else. I just Googled, you know, the name, and, you know, so I don't know any more than anyone else on that score.
It's another thread to pull when you go back over. So,
you know, really, and is very, very interesting. And, you know, drew all those writers and other people to the area. And that was the place that we're at the end of the Mayan calendar, December of 2012. That was the place that was supposed to have been the refuge of the apocalypse that was going to happen, you know, at the end of the Mayan calendar. So Bugaresh village is another tiny village. It's like Rennes-le-Chateau. They had to have the army come in. They put up, you know, portable toilets. All the villagers were, you know, putting their houses up for rent and everything, because there was going to be this big deluge of people on December 12th into Bugaresh. Well, it didn't turn out quite as big as they thought, but it was hilarious because major media was there. The Wall Street Journal covered it, you know.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And major media covered it. And the articles are still, you know, still live online. But yeah, it was a big deal that turned out not to be much of a deal at all. But people are very much drawn to Bugaresh, and it's basically, oh my God, the best restaurant over there now is in Bugaresh. It's outside of Bugaresh on a farm.
Okay. D. Dorothy elaborated, the producer of a film in the 60s held a ceremony in the tower in Girona. He wanted to find an object. I guess that's what scared the...
Oh, well, that's interesting. I mean, there's supposed to be something in the tower of Mary Magdalene, the Tour Magdala in Rennes-le-Chateau, and I believe it was in the 80s, an A&E program. Do you know that announcer guy named Bill Curtis? He used to do shows and stuff.
Yes.
Anyway, Bill Curtis and a friend of mine now, Professor Robert Eisenman, who's the guy who snuck the oh my God, out of Israel, the texts.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Dead Sea Scrolls, or
the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Okay.
He took photographs, brought them back, and then made them public. Got in big trouble with the Israeli government. Couldn't go back to Israel for a long time, but he's welcome. But anyway, that was Robert Eisenman, you know, professor of Judaism and ancient Christianity are his specialties. anyway, he was there, and another couple people, and a guy named Captier, who was the son or grandson of the bell ringer who discovered something in the church at the time of Saunier. And they started looking for something in the oh, got a private message. Yep, sure, just hit me up about Tracy Twyman. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, the oh, lost my train of thought.
I'm trying to remember.
I probably was making it up because I can't remember, so it was probably just a lie. But anyhow,
No.
anyhow, what was I saying? Oh my God, let's just.
Hey, me too. It was sometimes things come
Well, I've
in
got an excuse.
peripherally and it
You can't claim
derails
the
you.
same, so I blame age.
Okay. Philip Blair asks, did Henry Lincoln ever prank you just for fun? If so, what was the prank?
Oh God, Henry pranked everybody. But the prank was what Henry used to do, which used to drive me crazy because I did get to be good friends with Henry for a number of years. He just passed away this past year. And anyway, but Henry always, it's like, he's always the teacher. You're always the student, otherwise there will be no conversation. And he has this way of, he's always like testing you, asking you a question, and it'll be like a kind of a trick question. And then he'll berate you for not getting it, and stuff. So as far as pranking, that's the only thing. Now, I can't say that Henry ever told me personally that Emma Calvé carving was a hoax. But, I do know, I mean, somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I remember being satisfied at one point, someone found to let me know that it probably wasn't real or authentic.
Okay. Oh, Philip Blair also.
It could be wrong too. It could be wrong because there's plenty of other stuff down there that are authentic and real.
Philip Blair also gives you a memory jogger, and you were talking about the bell ringer who found something.
Oh, in the tower. Oh, thank you. Who was that? Oh, that was so nice.
Philip Blair, our longtime regular.
Me around, and like be my memory. That would be wonderful. It's only short-term memory. I can remember stuff from forever back, but it's like what I'm talking about. Forget it. But anyway, because they mentioned the looking for something in the tower in Girona. Well, they were looking for something, and they felt that they'd identified something. They did ground penetrating radar in there too, and in the church. But they were digging in the tower, and they hit something wood. I think it was wood. Anyway, they hit something hard, and suddenly the mayor stopped them and suspended the thing. And I don't know why. Maybe he thought they really weren't going to find anything, but if they were, he didn't want it to be a bunch of Americans,
Sure.
finding it. I don't know, but
sure.
There's definitely, something in Tor Magdala. And if there is a connection, which I know that there is between the tower in Girona and the tower in Rennes-le-Chateau, I would be a bit surprised if there's something inside there too.
Yeah, and if Americans got too involved with the site, there'd be a McDonald's there soon, or even a Walmart, like you can now see from the top of the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan, which I find completely offensive. But we've hit the end of our time here, Renee, and we've got to do this again.
Okay,
absolutely, and we have to meet up. We got to make this meetup happen because you've got to see the Peace Tower, Rubidoux, and Mission Inn firsthand, where we can, walk around and I can show you the specific things, and I think you'll find it interesting. But tell everybody, before we sign off here, tell everybody where they can find you.
Okay, well, first of all, I do a weekly show on kgradb.com. It's called Night Vision, and we air at 11 p.m. Eastern, but I'm getting ready to make a little bit of a change, and I'm going to be airing at midnight Eastern, 9 o'clock Pacific. My website is called newrennies.org. That's NEWRENNIES.org. And if you're a Rennie, then you know. If you're not, a Rennie is someone who's caught up in the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau and all the attached mysteries.
There you go. There you go. Well,
you can write to me there at info@newrennies.org.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you again for being here today. This has been fantastic. And
you.
I look forward to having you here again and to finally, where we can meet up with you guys and do that tour. So
that would be great.
Let's make that happen. So
I'd like to drag Don down there, Don Ecker, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk him into that. Between the two of us, we'll get him and Vicky out there too. That'd be a lot of fun.
Great.
Yeah. So thanks again, Renee, and we'll be talking real soon.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you. Bye. Okay, folks. That was just a fantastic show. This has been one of my favorites. Thank you guys for the turnout. I mean, we had a lot of viewers today, well over 100, and a lot of folks in the live chat. Great questions. I hope you guys really enjoyed this. Please go check out Renee's show at KGRA and go to her links and everything. I think you'll find it really fascinating. And my books that talk about this are the first Secret Missions book, Hidden Legacy of California, and Empire of the Wheel 3, The Nameless Ones. And you guys know where to find me and my stuff, walterbosley.com for links to the books. And thanks again, folks, for the great turnout. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you again on Saturday. So you guys have a good night, and we'll see you next time.